welcome back to Crimes from the East. I'm your host, Pia, and with me is cousin Alex. Hi, Alex.
Hey, Pia. How's it going?
How are you doing? Jinx. It's going good. I'm a little tired, but I feel accomplished. I did a lot of house cleaning. I settled 5,000 toys that my toddler loves to spread around the house. How are you doing, Alex?
Man, it's January. It's dark just so much. I hate this time of year, to be honest. I know that January is supposed to be sort of like the beginning of the new year and getting in whatever, blah, blah, blah. But I'm just like, can we get to springtime already?
It's a bad start. It's a bad start to the year, right? Like January.
It's rough on the northern hemisphere wise anyways. We need to get to India, get some sun, vitamin D.
I wish the first month was like June.
Yeah, that'd be
right?
good.
Just start the year with June. We need to change the calendar.
Right.
Move things around. Let New Year be like May 31st is New Year's, and then June, whoa, Happy New Year. You know, it'll change things mentally, psychologically.
And then you like sort of end the year on a high note because it's springtime. And then, yeah, I'm for that.
And then summer's coming. Oh my God.
Exactly.
We're solving like big problems in the world.
I don't know if you knew this. I talked to your mom, who was with my mom.
Oh yeah, they're traipsing all around Kerala. I'm so jealous.
Looks so nice. But I informed Mashi, your mom, of my like most recent hobby that I've started, and she, in return, informed me that I am officially a hooker.
What?
I've joined the hooker club because my new hobby
I'm so proud of you.
is crochet, which involves a hook. So that was a really fun conversation that we had. Hi, Mashi. Your newest and bluest hooker is here.
For a second, I got a little excited. I'm like, what, Alex?
I know.
That's a high-paying job. Congrats.
Can be, can't it?
Yeah. Well, okay. So I'll introduce you like that in the next episode. Our family's latest hooker. We have a bunch. They love to crochet.
It's in our blood.
You know, by the way, Alex, today we're going to do something very different for our case.
Speaking of a guerrilla strategy, this has nothing to do with gorillas, I'm guessing, but...
No gorillas here.
We're switching it up. We need a name for these kinds of episodes.
I'm going to call these pravasi episodes. And let me explain what I mean by that. So the case doesn't take place in South Asia, but the people involved, they are of some Indian ancestry.
Okay.
Their ancestors were Indian and lived in India at one point.
Interesting. I mean, I can only think of one well-known place. It's either like the UK or, I mean, obviously there are a lot of Indian communities in the US, but I feel like you're talking about something else.
The case actually takes place in Lilawattie, Florida, but the victims involved are of Indian ancestry.
Zambia.
No, they're Indo Guyanese.
What? South America.
Uh-huh.
Interesting.
Now, I've been drawn to this case for more than a decade. I don't know why, but it stuck out to me ever since I saw it on Unsolved Mysteries. And I think it's because the people involved are, you know, kind of somewhat Indian, right? Like when you see people who look like you don't always want representation in true crime. Like I don't want South Asians to be victims in any way, but that's what made me remember the case.
Yeah. It's kind of like when Indian people see me, they're like, is she? Are you?
You know, Alex, the best part is you look so ethnically ambiguous. You could literally pass for like at least 30 countries, I think. It's beautiful. You're like the perfect actress for like Netflix and Prime movies where they want to make sure they represent everything.
Until I open my mouth and then they're like, boom, American. No question. Gringa. as my Brazilian friends call me, which I am always sort of startled by.
Okay, so anyways, today we will talk about the unsolved disappearance of Moses Lal and Lilawattie Buratan, or Buiratan. Buiratan.
Buratan. That sounds more like Indonesian almost, or Southeast Asian to me.
I looked up this last name, a very unique name, and I couldn't find anyone with this last name except for this victim. And I looked up that term. It actually is a kind of rattan weaving work that was done in Indonesia and other places to make furniture, like rattan furniture.
Yeah.
So bui rattan is a type of rattan.
Oh, okay.
Weaving artisanal skill. So it's possible that, you know, her ancestors did that kind of work and the name stuck. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
So these two, Moses Lal and Lilawattie, they were related. They were relatives. She was his mashi, his auntie.
Okay.
His mom's sister, but very close in age. They were like barely 5 or 6 years apart. That happens in Indian families a lot, by the way. Like back in the day, your uncle's like younger than you.
I think my mom even has like an uncle that is a teenager.
Yeah, me too. I have a cousin uncle who's like younger than me.
It's wild.
These two, the victims, were originally from Guyana in South America, but they disappeared under mysterious circumstances while living in Florida 28 years ago. So it's an old case from like 1994. Good times. The sources for today's episode are the Sun Sentinel, NamUs, Web Sleuths, Unsolved Mysteries Wiki, and of course, Season 8, Episode 2 of Unsolved Mysteries and Season 5, Episode 15 of Disappeared. So this case has been featured in quite a few true crime shows.
I'm curious to hear why, because I haven't heard about this story before.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the country that Moses and Lilawattie came from, Guyana.
There are two Guyanas, or is French Guyana the same as Guyana?
French Guyana. Is there like a country called French Guyana?
I think there's French Guyana, and it was a French colony in regular Guyana, which was maybe British colonized or something.
Oh, okay. It's a different country, like physically a different country.
Cool. I wasn't sure because I've heard of both.
So it seems like, yes, there is like some French territory in South America called French Guyana. And it is different from Guyana.
And isn't Guyana where Jonestown was?
Yes, it sure is.
So is this like a cursed place?
No, it's not. It's actually a beautiful place. It's not
I'm
cursed.
just kidding.
Now, Guyana is such a beautiful place with rich biodiversity and a relatively small human population in an area about the size of Idaho in the US and Gujarat in India. So it's not like too big, but it's big enough.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Guyana is in South America. It's nestled between Venezuela, Brazil, and Suriname. So it's got a nice coastline, beaches, and like tropical Amazonian forest jungles in the back.
That's where we should be right now.
That's where we need to be.
Frigid northern hemisphere.
Now, 80% of the country is covered in dense tropical rainforests, some of which are practically inaccessible to humans, like most of the Amazon jungle is, because it is part of the Amazon. Now, there are magnificent waterfalls and a ton of biodiversity that is unique on the planet. Guyana is home to more than 900 species of birds, 225 species of mammals, 880 species of reptiles. And more than 6,500 different species of plants. So,
I like all of that except for the reptiles part. I feel like there are not many reptiles that I'm loving.
You really got to be some kind of snake person to like reptiles. Yeah, exactly. I don't like reptiles either. But I respect them. There are creatures on this earth. They need, they have their place. Just not in my home. Just not in my home.
My respect takes the form of fear in this particular situation.
Now, among these wildlife categories, the most famous are the arapaima, which is the world's largest scaled freshwater fish.
Ooh. Ooh.
And if anyone's played Animal Crossing, they would know this fish because you have to collect it for your aquarium.
Really? What?
Arapaima, yeah. They also have the giant anteater, which is so
Cool.
cute.
Yeah, I love anteaters.
And there's a bird called the cock of the rock.
Oh, no. What is that?
I had to look this up. It's a goofy looking bird.
Cock of the rock. Definitely an English person named this bird.
It's a goofy looking bird. I think it's like an orange bird with a little floof on his head.
Oh, it is really cute.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a lot of personality.
It's just a bird.
Cool biodiversity.
And that is so rare on this planet that I'm glad Guyana is part of that. You know, Guyana is helping preserve that. We need less people, more jungles, please.
Okay, everyone stay away from Guyana. Leave it alone, please.
Leave it alone.
I know I just said that that's where we need to be, but actually 86 that statement. Leave it alone.
Just visit and leave.
Don't even visit. Just forget about it existing.
Go to Florida. It's already ruined. Just go there.
Sorry, Florida listeners.
The land was originally occupied by several indigenous tribes of people like the Lokono, Kalina, and Waiwai. Now, these indigenous tribes were sadly colonized by the Dutch West Indian Company in the 1500s.
Dang colonial white devils at it again.
One thing we've noticed is wherever the Dutch West Indian Company went, you know who followed after? The colonial white devils from Britain came right over in 1814.
Oh, yep.
And they found the place was perfect to cultivate sugar. And they did so by forming large plantations, especially in the region called Demerara. So you may have heard of Demerara sugar.
Yeah, yummy.
That's in Guyana.
Okay, good to know.
Now, they formed massive plantations and utilized slavery to produce and sell sugar all over the world. Not cool. Not cool. Damn devils.
Mm-hmm.
People from Africa were captured and brought over to work here for nearly 150 years before they were officially emancipated in 1838. And most of them abandoned the plantations at once because I'm sure they wanted nothing to do with these cursed places. Now, the Brits were in a jam and they needed workers to exploit. So what did they do? They've got some colonies out in the east. So they lied and trapped thousands of Indians and Sri Lankans and shipped them over here as indentured laborers. They were made to sign 5-year contracts at a very, very, very low daily wage, after which they were promised a little promotion and another promise that after 5 years of further servitude, they could either go back to India, they would get tickets, or they'd get a little land to build their own home and start their own business.
The strategy sounds kind of familiar. A little World Cup action.
Nearly 240,000 Indians were brought over a span of 80 years to Guyana until the indentured labor system was cancelled by Indian nationals in 1917. A lot of Indo Guyanese people today still retain parts of their Indian heritage, like their religions. There's Hindus, there's Muslims, there's Christians, their customs and traditions, their music, their festivals, and even their cuisine, although some of it is delightfully mixed in and mingled with the Afro-Guyanese culture as well.
I mean, it sounds like a delicious and nutritious blend of like cultures.
It's so amazing. Have you had food from either TNT, Trinidad, or Guyana?
Yeah, there's a Guyanese food stall in Oregon that I got. I don't even remember what I got, but I do remember.
Did you get
it was
doubles?
Delicious. Yeah, I think so. There you go. Yes.
So the Indo-Guyanese and Afro-Guyanese mixed, and so their music's mixed. And there's this genre of music called soca chutney music, which is so amazing. Like, have you heard soca music?
No.
You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like,
yes.
you hear it.
Yes. I know exactly what you're talking about.
And so they mix in like Indian words, old Indian tunes with the dholak and all that. And they make this genre of music, which is so freaking amazing. You can't sit still
Oh my God.
if you hear this music.
Nice.
Okay?
Love that.
I think maybe we'll do a little thing at the end of the episode. We'll listen to some of this music.
Super down.
So I'm just so excited about Guyana. I was like asking my husband, maybe we should go on vacation here. Let's
Thank you for this
go.
overview. Like, you know, as I said, I'd heard of it, I had an idea, but I didn't know all of these fun, interesting details.
Yeah, it's a very modest, humble country. Like, you don't hear too much about Guyana. Like, other countries are like, come to Jamaica, come to blah, blah, blah. Guyana's like, we're fine. We know we're cool. We don't need to have you come see all this.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so now that I've like gone on and on and on about Guyana, let's actually start with the case today. The victims involved, one of them being Moses Lal.
Mm-hmm.
These are all old-timey names which they've preserved because that's what happens when a culture moves from one country to the other. They preserve the state of their culture and traditions as it was back in the day.
When they left, yeah.
Bhagwaniala Lal, also known as Moses Lal, was a 31-year-old Indo Guyanese man who hailed from a prominent family that specialized in exotic birds and animals for export since the 1970s. Now, as we just talked about, the jungles and the animals and the reptiles in Guyana, they have a rich resource to draw from. The Lal family, who lived in the Guyanese capital of Georgetown, bought animals from local trappers who scoured the jungles for various types of parrots and tropical birds and sold them through their family business. I think they exported them as well, so they were doing well.
Poor birds. Bird goes from being in the jungle to being in a cage. Bit sad.
Ugh, undesirable. Yeah. Now, he was one of 7 siblings and had an enterprising personality. He was ambitious and hardworking. He had moved to Toronto, or is it Toronto?
Toronto. It's
Toronto.
Toronto, I think.
Toronto. In his 20s with his aunt, Lilawattie, and elder brother Prem to study in college and also try to make it as a model. But things didn't quite work out. I guess he didn't find enough work. His look was kind of unique, and I don't know how many Indian ethnicity models existed in Northern America at that point.
Right, yeah.
Now maybe he'd get like work. He'd be like a star.
A hit, yeah.
Moses moved to the U.S. His mother, Mahadi Lal, set up a warehouse in Queens, New York called Malabar Aviary Incorporated, where his family would export birds from Guyana to. And after the quarantine period, Moses would then sell these birds off to pet stores in the U.S. Expensive exotic birds, not like little parakeets and stuff. So like macaws, African greys, and all kinds of other exotic birds. Maybe the cock on the rock made it here too.
One cock on the rock, please. It sounds like a dirty like cocktail.
Ooh. Oh my God. I'm like totally into cocktails these days, by the way. So maybe I'll like
really?
message one of these mixologists on Instagram and be like, hey, can you make a cocktail called Cock on the Rock? Inspired by this goofy looking bird.
Oh yeah, that could be cool.
Maybe it's something with like persimmon because that matches the color.
It's the right color. Totally.
Okay. Well, we're like derailed.
Very unusual for us, isn't it?
His 35-year-old aunt, Lilawattie Buiratan, came over from Toronto to help with the business. And she worked her magic to ensure the birds were well cared for and healthy. Together, they took great care of the birds, and business was slowly taking off. On some days, they would sleep in the warehouse after a long day of caring for the birds. So this is their whole life. This was their whole life. They weren't like partying or living it up. I mean, they're in New York, you know, the place all immigrants kind of rushed to in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And
different city then too, yeah.
But all these two did was just focus on their business and take care of their birds. They started to import more and more birds, more than they could sell, and realized that the harsh winters of New York were not ideal for these tropical birds. So in 1987, they leased some land in Florida and set up a sanctuary of sorts to keep the birds more comfortable in a warmer tropical climate until they were sold. They actually cared about their birds.
Yeah.
Owing to complaints from neighbors in Florida, they had to keep moving. And in 1992, they finally found a 5-acre ranch in Loxahatchee, Florida, which they leased. And they could now house and care for almost like 500-600 birds at a time and even more.
I wonder why people were complaining. Noise or smell?
Well, noise would be the first because the smell, I mean, you can close your windows, but the noise will still come in.
Yeah, but you like go outside and all you smell is just like the caca of hundreds of birds. That's not my kind of neighbor.
In winter where I live, it's like silence, just silence. And the minute like spring starts to creep in, the birds come out. Early in the morning, they're like, go, baby. And I'm like, shut the hell up.
I think we might have reached our like fundamental philosophical divide here. You're on like anti-sound and I'm on anti-smell.
Together, we would make horrible neighbors for Moses.
The most annoying neighbor for these people, yeah.
We'd be like sending them multiple notes a day. So Moses would often travel to Africa to acquire exotic reptiles for his family business. He wanted to start selling reptiles in the U.S. as well, so he made a ton of trips.
I'm starting to feel like if this guy didn't disappear, he would have been the like next Tiger King or something.
Yeah. Oh, man. Like, can you imagine a Desi-looking Tiger King? That would be awesome.
Actually.
Sher Khan. Not Tiger King, but Sher Khan. Now, Moses handled all the business dealings, all the paperwork, and his aunt Lilawattie handled the birds. She had a magic touch. She had the empathy, the sympathy, and the right instincts to take care of these creatures. Lilawattie soon ran a budding bird breeding program at the ranch as well. She would wake up early and feed the little hatchlings, wean them, socialize them appropriately until they were healthy enough to be sold. So, yeah, like we talked earlier, their entire lives revolved around these birds. Perhaps too much, because they weren't known to socialize or fraternize with actual local humans.
Humans. So they're like kind of just weird bird people. But are they weird bird people or are they like people of color in like communities in the 90s that were probably not super welcoming? That's an assumption on my part, but I just feel like that's a very like possible.
That was exactly my thought as well. They may have kind of self-isolated, not just because of what they were doing, but also because of what they perceived in the community.
Yeah.
We're just speculating. Maybe these people were amazing. The community was amazing and they didn't care about race or color or whatever. And Moses and Lilawattie were just private people, right?
Yeah, totally. Weird bird people.
Weird bird people. And this area was known for other bird breeders. So they had like a thriving community here. Like more than 100 bird breeders lived in Loxahatchee.
Okay. Bird community.
In a stroke of bad luck, the U.S. passed a Wild Bird Conservation Act in 1993, banning import of exotic birds into the country. So Moses and Lila could no longer rely on their family exports to acquire birds. They now shifted their business and focused on breeding the birds that they already had in the U.S. to sell.
I have to say that their bad luck, I kind of support the government. Their bad luck, it might be just an ecological tiny stroke of good luck.
That law was probably a long time coming. It was needed. Like, I'm sure by that time, so many birds and animals were trapped from their free environments and brought over for captivity. Lilawattie was industrious and was able to make this a successful endeavor with all her hard work. She was getting really overwhelmed, though, because the volume of birds to care for was now growing exponentially.
A victim of her own success.
So Moses and Lila decided to employ some workers to take care of the property and the birds. They hired Daljit Harry Gobin, or Harry, an Indo Guyanese man who was a distant family acquaintance back in Guyana. They also hired another man called Roland Felix Ayum, who was the brother of an African reptile dealer Moses had met on one of his trips to Africa. So for a year, the ranch continued on despite a few setbacks, which we will talk about later.
Okay.
Things are going to go a little south now. Well, they're already in the south. They're in Florida.
They went south and now things are going south.
One fine day on June 4th, 1994, a delivery driver, Daryl, from a company called Bird Haven, brought the birdseed delivery as scheduled to the ranch, and he was surprised to find the gate locked and chained up. This was unusual. The ranch hands knew of the delivery dates and left the gates open for him every week so he could drive up and deliver the sacks right at the doorstep of the home. Daryl left the birdseed at the gate and left, although he was curious, and returned the next day to see if he could speak to Moses or Leela to confirm his delivery. He knew something was wrong because he could hear birds squawking inside, but nobody came to the gate. Where was everyone? He knew that the birds would be hungry, and the seeds he had dropped a week before would have finished by now. No, wait.
Imagine if Jeff Bezos had never existed and deliveries, like delivery men, could still care about their jobs.
That's an interesting observation. You're right. Like, which delivery driver would usually care about all this, right? They've been paid to drop the package and leave. But he thought all these things, which is probably rare these days. But in 1994...
So maybe that's a good also indication that, like, you know, they weren't super social, but they had good relations with their vendors and with, like, the people that they worked with. Like, because, I don't know. Again, making a pretty wild assumption, but he might have, like, the delivery man might have cared about their delivery because he had a good relationship with them.
Yeah. I mean, the community doesn't seem to be ostracizing them or anything like that, right? Like, they seem to be caring enough. So Daryl raised the alarm and alerted his boss, Tim Tagrini, who asked the other bird breeders and people who deal in those circles about the Lal Ranch. Now, adults can go missing on their own volition. It isn't a crime until a relative or close acquaintance reports them missing after a long period of disappearance. So no one had raised the alarm about anyone being missing from the ranch. Mm-hmm. But people were missing. No one's picking up the packages. Word got out that the birds at the Lal Ranch were by themselves and sounded distressed. The Loxahatchee area has nearly 100 other prominent bird breeders, so the locals came over to look. They were all very concerned for the birds' well-being. They called the Florida Fish and Game Department, the cops, and even animal control. But they couldn't do anything since this was on private property. And turns out that Moses hadn't even registered his company or bought a license to breed and sell the birds. He only had the import license, which he was using back in New York. Now, why Moses skipped these steps is baffling because it only cost $25 to license his business. But he didn't do it. I don't know why he didn't do it. This, however, did create a problem with various agencies not being able to come onto the property to save the birds.
I'm pretty sure, like, I have made the same mistakes somehow in my small business that I own. It's just like, there's a lot of paperwork and it's really confusing. And sometimes you just forget the basic thing, like registering your business. I hope I have, actually. That would be messed up.
No, so it wasn't as simple as forgetting.
Are they trying to evade taxes or something? Like, what's going on?
Maybe. Possible. There's a lot of money involved. Each of these birds can cost anywhere from $500 to like $2,000-$3,000.
What? No. Who the heck is paying $1,000 or more bucks for a freaking bird? Just keep it in a cage and clean its shit? Come on.
But these are not like canaries and parakeets. These are huge birds. Toucans, Alex.
Okay. You have a right. You have a point.
According to internationally acclaimed aviarist Howard Warren, who operated his own breeding program there, the Lal Ranch was shut off for the world. On his blog, he wrote that they spoke with no one in the local avicultural community, nor did they interact with anyone at any of the surrounding ranches. They lived extremely private lives, and no one except their vet was ever permitted to see their birds. In fact, they even refused to purchase a license that would have allowed them to legally breed and sell birds within the state of Florida. When approached by Florida Fish and Game the previous year, who urged them to purchase a permit and undergo minimal inspection procedures, they declined. They claimed that the birds were not for sale or breeding and were maintained for personal pleasure. Most of the locals who knew of Moses and Lila never saw them and were aware of their existence only because they all used the same feed company, the Bird Haven Company. So it seems like they were trying to kind of skirt the laws for obviously financial purposes. Like, I think they didn't want to report on taxes and all that stuff. That's probably it. Not the best look for them.
Yeah, it's like pretty mildly sketchy. I already don't really like this whole bird selling business, so I'm sorry to say, but I'm losing sympathy for whatever's gonna happen pretty fast. But maybe I'll regain it. Like I'm trying to hold my judgment until I hear the whole story.
So after 8 days, 8 days of the locals losing their minds trying to get these birds some help and different departments dropping the ball, Tim Tegrini, owner of Bird Haven, came over to take another look at the ranch. And to his utter surprise, the 40 sacks of sunflower seeds and dried corn lay right there at the gate of the ranch, unclaimed. He could hear birds shrieking in absolute distress. He made the decision to hop the fence and take a look. He walked up behind the 3-bedroom ranch home and made his way to the bird cages. He was faced with a horrific scene and a horrible stench. There lay hundreds of dead birds, parrots, macaws, toucans at the bottom of the cages, and other birds weak and dying, screaming in terror. Some of the birds had resorted to cannibalizing the dead in order to survive. It was a nightmare, especially for local people who loved and cared for birds.
Man, I'm feeling really bad about the birds. They are the victims in this story as far as I'm concerned so far. Again, trying to hold my judgment, but I do not like this. This is messed up.
And again, these are special birds. They are actually very intelligent.
Yeah.
Some of the African greys are supposedly at the same intellectual level as an 8-year-old human child.
Oh my God.
I think. So imagine them going through this horror and having to eat their friends and family. Oh, man.
Yeah.
So Tim called all his bird breeder friends, including our famous aviarist we mentioned before, called Howard Warren. And together they raised enough of a ruckus that finally the authorities responded. And on June 15th, which is, I think, like 10 days later, the Palm Beach sheriff's officers came over to assess the dreadful situation. Now, Howard Warren wrote in his blog that inside the house awaited another horror. Incubators, still operating, contained dead bird babies that had hatched but were never fed. Aquarium brooders that were lined up against the wall all had dead baby blue and gold macaws, which are now, by the way, endangered. There are only like 400 left in the wild. All had starved to death, sitting on clean bedding while waiting for their next meal. An open bucket of hand-feeding formula was on the kitchen counter with a bowl and a spoon next to it. It appeared as if someone had changed the bedding in the brooders and was ready to mix up some formula for the birds when he or she was interrupted. Now, they counted nearly 500 dead birds and another 330 birds that were dangerously close to dying. Howard and local aviarists all stepped in to help and hand-fed hundreds of birds to save them. Now, the birds that had died were estimated to be worth at least $500,000.
Oh my God.
And the living birds cost like another $200,000.
And this was just their quote unquote hobby.
Hobby, just a personal hobby.
Just a very expensive, fun, stinky hobby.
This was a huge financial loss for the Lals. They definitely wouldn't have just upped and left like that, leaving, all this financial asset, I would think, all these financial assets. The surviving birds were sold off by Florida Animal Control to the public after the Lal family was unable to pay the hefty sum of $180,000 to claim them back. So Moses and Leela's family did come over to Florida. I think Moses' mom, Mahida Lal, had come over to try and claim the birds, but they couldn't cough up $180,000 out of the blue.
Yeah.
To claim them. So they were sold to public at an auction. Many of the birds went to inexperienced people who had no idea how to care for them because they were sold for such cheap amounts. Instead of like $2,000-$3,000 per bird, they went for like $300 to $500.
Jesus.
So anyone with a kid who had a birthday coming got one of these birds and they had no idea how to care for them. So many of them ended up dead soon, in months, which is a tragedy.
I can only hope that these birds are paying for some horrible karma from a previous life and that they were all murderers and rapists in a past life, because this is a really bad,
they didn't deserve this
present life that they were living. Yeah,
they did not deserve this. And some parrots live up to 100 years, by the way.
Parrots? What?
Yes, some parrots can live up to 100 years.
That's insane.
So it's not like they would have just died in a couple of years anyway. No, they could have lived full lives, like 100 years. And we killed them.
Whatever. It's a disaster.
Extinction.
Yeah.
And now, I'll admit that we have made this horrible mistake once in the past. When we were kids, my mom bought my sister a tiny little tortoise or turtle. I don't know what it was for her birthday. We had no idea how to care for it. And even though we gave it lettuce and cabbage leaves to eat and a big tub with little water to live in, a little shelter, some rocks and everything, it died in 2 weeks. And I think it was either already sick from all the travel or poor care before that, or it was too cold for him in the winter.
Darn.
And we didn't know that, right? Like, they don't give us instructions. They just said, feed them leaves. That's it. We had no idea what to do for that poor thing. So I feel awful about that. R.I.P. Rest in peace, little Mikey. We're sorry. We're sorry.
I'm sorry.
I never, ever wanted a pet again after that. And to this day, I will never have a pet because of that. I'm like, no, I can't be responsible for another innocent life. Especially because they can't talk. They can't tell you what's wrong with them, what they need. And I'm like, no, I don't want that stress and anxiety on me. So
I feel you.
And I won't go to what's that horrible like nightmare place where people watch these captive orcas perform stupid
SeaWorld.
SeaWorld. I will
Does
never
that place
go
still
there.
exist? I thought it got shut down.
Still exists.
Oh my God, that's evil. That's
Still
evil.
exists.
If you go to SeaWorld, shame on you.
Don't go there. Please don't go there. Don't take your kids there.
It's bad.
Those creatures are so intelligent. They should not be in that tiny captivity.
Bathtubs for their entire lives. It's funny you mentioned that because I just tried to watch Blackfish, which is, I think, a CNN produced documentary about it. And I couldn't even get through 5 minutes of it.
It was so depressing and so concerning. Yeah. Watch Blackfish if you want to ruin your day.
Yeah, exactly.
Open your eyes to the depths of cruelty that humans will go to in the name of entertainment.
And money.
Go check it out.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Now, back to our case. This is why we're doing this episode in 2 parts, by the way. Because there's so much to discuss.
Jeez.
Okay, so no one had bothered much to look for Moses or Leela. Where were they? And where were Harry and Felix, the 2 ranch hands? No one cared. Everyone only cared about the birds.
That's messed up, but it's funny.
I know.
It's bad, but it's also like I'm also mostly concerned about the birds right now.
I know, and even in our like Burari episode, we were like, "What happened to Tommy?"
Right.
Poor Tommy. But it's true. Animals are so innocent. Creatures are innocent. They didn't ask for this. They were involved without like if they have consent. I don't even know.
Yeah.
So most people in that area only cared about the birds, and they're like, "People, what? We don't know. Who cares?"
Yeah.
Except for the family.
Right.
So Lal's mother was contacted, and she flew over to Florida. She told the police that the last time Mahadi herself had heard from Moses was 5 days before the delivery driver had left the packages. Now, Moses had called his parents in Guyana to say he was sick with malaria after returning from a trip to Africa. He said he was resting and that Leela was in the kitchen cooking. He had sounded stressed, unlike himself, and hurried. So, I mean, I don't know, maybe he was just sick and not feeling it. Or, I don't know, was someone else there? Did he have a gun to his head? Who knows?
I mean, malaria. Probably not fun. Could have just been the malaria, right? But maybe not.
If he had malaria, that could have been a ruse.
True. Although with the tropical birds and the, equatorial travels, that's where a lot of malaria is, right? Mosquitoes and all that.
Malaria is like the least of your problems.
That's true.
It's probably one of the safer diseases to get.
Right.
Just a few days later, on June 18th, the cops traced ranch hand Roland Felix in New York City. He said he had quit work and moved to New York 2 weeks before the Lals went missing. Convenient, don't you think? Like, oh, I wasn't there. I'd quit 2 weeks ago. He also told them that on June 4th, which is the day of the delivery, so the day that they had apparently disappeared, he had received a disturbing call from the other ranch hand, Harry. Harry had told him that he had just witnessed some smugglers or criminals of some kind take Moses, Leela, and a bunch of birds at gunpoint in a white van. Whoa.
Okay.
That is concerning.
Yeah. And then they just left $500K worth of birds behind.
The smugglers just wanted these 2 people. I don't know why. Now, the cops brought in Lal's mother to look over the property and point out if anything was out of place. She immediately noticed that the family's white 1992 Plymouth Voyager van was missing. The cops put a bolo out for the white van and actually got a hit a few weeks later.
Is bolo be on the lookout?
Yes.
Haha.
Do you think this was the white van that Harry saw the smugglers take them in? Like, he mentioned a white van, and a white man is missing from the ranch.
The white van fits,
drive into it.
Drive it away.
In July, investigators were notified that the van had been impounded at a traffic stop arrest 400 miles away in Richmond Hills, Georgia, a month ago on June 7th. So this disappearance allegedly took place on June 4th, and the van was impounded on June 7th. So that's like 3 days later. That's enough time to drive from here to there.
For
400
sure.
miles is not much.
Yeah.
So while the van was found just a couple days after the Lals went missing, the information didn't reach the Palm Beach sheriff because information just moved really slow back then. Telex, like Morse, beep, 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 van missing, I don't know. And that too, like manually looking up files in physical paper files.
Oh my God.
So this delay may have cost them the case because the driver of the van had been transporting tropical parrots and 100 exotic turtles when he was pulled over to the side of the road to fix a flat tire. The state trooper checked his license, which was handed over by the driver, and that was of Moses Lal. The license was suspended, so the man was arrested and spent a night in jail.
They had him, whoever it was.
Now, the next day, he was let out on bail as he had pleaded with the cops that he had to feed the birds and the turtles in the van. Now, the Georgia police courteously drove the man to a motel for the night. They're like, "All right, sir, let me drive you to the motel."
Your chauffeur awaits. Yeah. Okay, this is weird. This is all really weird. What is this story?
Who does this? I can't imagine cops driving anyone anywhere today. Especially a brown man. Forget it.
Brown man who smells like turtles, probably.
The next day, they learned that the man had never checked into the motel, and he never returned to the station to claim the van either. So he just kind of upped and left. The minute he got out of the police station, he's like, see ya. Now, when the mugshot was shown to Mahadi Lal, they're like, hey, listen, your son was arrested 2 days later. She identified the man as Daljit Harry Gobin, the missing ranch hand.
A.k.a. Harry.
Harry. The van was searched, and along with many expensive birds, reptiles, and turtles, they found an instructional tape on how to change one's identity.
This was definitely pre-YouTube.
Kind of dumb. Why did he keep it in the van? You should have washed it and thrown it.
It's like Googling how to get away with murder, how to kill your husband or whatever.
And why did he have the tape in the van? Did he also have a portable TV and VCR?
Right.
What was he planning to do? Like
the motel.
Motels didn't have VCRs. Come on. Did they? Does anyone who was alive and an adult or a kid and lived in a motel back in the 90s in America,
write to us.
Can they please chime in and tell us? Did motels have VCRs? Like, where would he play this tape? Why was he carrying it around? Did he want to like watch it again and again and be like, I'm going to get so good at this?
Maybe he thought that like he should keep it on him because it would never be found because he was never going to get found.
I'm sure the first instruction in that tape would be throw this tape away. Yeah. Destroy this tape when you watch it, you idiot.
Oh my god.
Dum dum. Give him a Buddhu award, please. We need to give him one.
That is comedic.
Harry, you get our first Buddhu award for this episode.
Buddhu award granted.
So the cops had him and they had let him go because they couldn't tell the difference between pictures of two Indo Guyanese men.
Oh, classic.
Okay, this is Harry. This guy is Harry. And this is Moses.
Okay, yeah. Pretty different bone structure, faces, hair, everything.
Totally different people.
Yeah.
These poor cops, they couldn't tell. They're like, they look the same to me. Harry was among the last people who had seen Moses and Leela alive, and the cops had lots of questions for him. But he vanished after this incident. I mean, why wouldn't he? He had that magic tape. So just like Harry, who vanished after this incident, we're going to vanish from this episode right now because we're going to cut this into a two-parter.
I have to go feed my 200 turtles.
And I have to go feed my one toddler, who is the equivalent of 200 turtles. Actually, I have to go first fetch her from school. There we go.
Should we trade licenses and just see what happens one day?
It seems like these white cops really can't tell the difference. I could be Priyanka Chopra. Don't you know me? I was in Baywatch, you idiot.
This doesn't look like you. What do you mean you?
What do you mean you? Hello? Yeah. So I hope. So we'll pick up next week. We're going to talk about Harry. We're going to talk about Felix. We're going to talk about some certain strange incidences that occurred before and after the disappearance of Moses and Leela. And also if there were any updates to this case. I just want to let you know now, spoiler alert, Moses and Leela were never found. So it is an unsolved case. That's why it was an unsolved mystery.
But man, the plot is as thick as the Guyanese rainforest, isn't it?
Perfect. That was amazing.
Thank you. I've been holding on to that one. Just waiting for my chance.
What are we calling this episode? Moses and Lila Saga.
Can we call this like the vanishing bird people of Guyana?
What are we going to call it? Birds of a feather? How's that?
Birds of a feather? Okay, well, yeah.
Or flown away. That sounds a little dramatic, but it kind of fits. Now, I don't know. We'll figure it out. We don't know what we're calling this yet. But you can join us for part 2 of this case next week on another episode of Crimes from the East, your Desi True Crime podcast with a little masala and spice. Bye. Namaste.
Bye. Thanks, Pia.